Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about something that is literally all around us, but that most of us never really see. Whenever you hit send on an email, or you fire up a video call, or start streaming your favorite show, it feels instant, right? Almost like magic. But what's really happening is you're kicking off this incredible chain reaction across a vast physical network you probably never even think about. Yeah, that so-called magic, it's all powered by this invisible giant. A massive, silent infrastructure of steel and circuits that's basically the backbone of our entire digital life. So let's pull back the curtain and take a look. We're talking about Canada's invisible backbone. And the hero of this story? It's the humble and, often totally overlooked telecommunications tower. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second and just grasp the incredible scale of what's going on here. Because Canada is right in the middle of this quiet but absolutely massive construction boom. And this is something that's going to define the country's digital future for decades. All right, to get a sense of this, let's start with the number. By 2025, it's projected that Canada will have over 41,000 of these towers. Now, that's already a huge number, right? But believe it or not, that's just the starting point, because by the end of the decade, we're looking at that number climbing to over 48,000. Now, you might hear a 3% annual growth rate and think, that's not so much. But you have to remember, every single one of these towers is a multi-million-dollar project. So a 3% growth rate is actually a massive, steady, and incredibly expensive expansion. So why the big push? What's driving all this? Well, it really boils down to three main things. First up, you've got 5G. In cities, 5G needs a lot more towers packed closer together. That's what they call densification. Then there's a huge effort to get better coverage out to rural and remote areas, to close that digital divide. And finally, you've got new wireless players jumping into the game, and they need to build out their own networks to even have a shot at competing. And this really puts it into perspective. Canadian telecoms are plowing 18% of their revenue right back into their networks. I mean, look at the comparison. That's way more than their counterparts in the US, the UK, or Australia. It really speaks to the unique challenge of trying to cover a country as vast as Canada and how much of a national priority this has become. So, all this talk about investment, what does it actually look like on the ground? To really get it, we need to zoom in on one single but absolutely massive example of this boom in action. Okay, get ready for this number. $70 billion. Let that sink in for a second. That's not the whole industry. That's what one company, Telus, is planning to spend over just 5 years to upgrade and expand its networks. It's just a staggering amount of money. So where in the world does $70 billion even go? It's not just one thing. It breaks down into three big missions. First, they're expanding those next-gen 5G and fiber networks. Second, they're pushing that connectivity out to those hard-to-reach rural and indigenous communities. And third, and this is really future-focused, they're building out these huge AI-powered data centers that are going to run the digital services of tomorrow. And here's the real takeaway. This isn't just about getting faster downloads or, watching cat videos without buffering. This is way bigger. This is about building the fundamental grid for a whole ecosystem of future tech. We're talking smart cities, telemedicine, even autonomous vehicles. None of that happens without this groundwork. Okay, so we've seen the scale, we've seen the mind-boggling investment. But let's connect the dots. Why should you care? What does all this tower building actually mean for the country and for you and me? Right, so here's the thing. These towers are so much more than just chunks of steel. You can really think of them as pillars of national progress. For one, they boost our whole economy, giving businesses the digital tools they need to compete on a global stage. They also help with climate resilience. Think about it, having robust communication lines during a flood or a fire is absolutely critical. And maybe most importantly, they help create more equitable access to things like education and healthcare for every single Canadian, no matter how far from a big city they live. One of the sources for this explainer just nailed it. They said, the humble telecom tower is quietly becoming a pillar of national progress. And that's it, isn't it? It's a powerful thought that sometimes the most important infrastructure is the stuff we barely even notice. But hang on, the story doesn't stop there. It's not just about building more towers. There's this really fascinating twist when you start to ask, okay, who actually owns and controls all this vital infrastructure? And this is where things get really interesting, especially when you look at how Canada compares to other places. In Canada, a whopping 95% of towers are owned by the carriers themselves, The big names like Bell, Rogers, and Telus. That is a world away from the model in the US, where most of the towers are actually owned by independent companies that just specialize in, owning towers. But that might all be about to change. Industry analysts are predicting a big shift. To free up all that cash they need for these massive 5G investments, the big carriers might start doing what are called sale-leaseback deals. Basically, they'd sell off their physical towers to another company and then just turn around and rent space on the exact same towers they just sold. It's a financial move that could totally open the door for a whole new group of companies to enter the Canadian market.
And all of this leaves us with a really big, fascinating question for the future. As our lives, our economy, our whole society becomes more and more dependent on this digital backbone, who should build, own, and control the towers that connect us all? That question is more important than ever. What's the right path for Canada's future? Well, that's going to be the next big conversation. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.